Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPAutos.com, your libertarian car guy, and I did make it home with 58 miles to spare on the battery, according to the car's computer. I started out with about 140 miles of indicated range on a full charge, which is the maximum range that you can get out of this thing, allegedly, though interestingly, as I went down the mountain, which is to the Roanoke Valley from where I live up in the hills of the Appalachians, it's about a 2,000-foot descent to the valley floor over the course of, I don't know, roughly about 10 miles of pretty much straight downhill. I actually got the indicated range up to 154 miles as the regenerative braking fed electricity back into the car. So that by the time I got down to that coffee shop where I go to work to avoid becoming a weird dude who lives alone up in the house and pees in mason jars, I actually had an indicated, I think it was 130 miles of charge left on the system when I got to my destination. So that is on the upside. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. Now, the downside was when I started back up the mountain, the reverse situation came into play, and the car, of course, had to work much harder to ascend that roughly 2,000-foot elevation gain to get me back home, and the battery's charge began to really plummet. In fact, I could watch the range left deplete. Just by glancing at it every couple of minutes, it would go down. It was like watching the gas gauge in a muscle car that was being driven pretty hard go down. You can literally watch the needle go down. So that by the time I got home, I was here at 58 miles, which is okay in that it did get me home, but not with a whole lot of margin left to spare. 58 miles is it's in the same ballpark as the amount of range left in a gasoline-powered car when that little fuel light comes on. You know, your car probably has a little fuel light, kicks on, and that will usually happen when there's a gallon or two of fuel left sloshing around in the tank, and it tells you better gas up, and you generally have about 30, 40 or so miles of range left before you better fill the tank up. Now, of course, the difference is it's easy to find a gas station and it's easy to fill up quickly. Not so easy to recharge the electric car, and that really is the big problem. There are probably some fast chargers downtown in Roanoke. I think I read that there were. Problem is, I'd have to go down to Roanoke, find the fast charger, and then I'd have to sit there and wait for 30 to 45 minutes to get some range back in the car, so it would substantially add to my drive time. The other alternative is just to plug it into a 120-volt outlet. The problem with that is that it's several hours at minimum before you recover any significant amount of charge. So here's the thing. I could make it down to my coffee shop and back. I didn't go anywhere else. And I had thought about going somewhere else. I'd thought about running down to the supermarket to grab some bird feed and some other things that I needed. But when I started seeing how quickly the range was depleting, and I got to thinking, well, what if I run out of range? And then I'm stuck. You're literally stuck. You can't just, get out, put your blinkers on, and hoof it a mile down the road to the gas station, get a can of gas, come back, and be back on your way. It's a whole big production. And that continues to be the electric car's most significant functional problem. It's not so much the range, it's the recharge time. And that's a problem of battery chemistry that, despite what you may have heard, isn't going to be solved anytime soon unless there is a complete breakthrough in battery design and they start using a different type of chemistry, a different type of battery, and I'm aware of no such development in progress. They have to charge the batteries at a relatively slow rate in order to avoid damaging the batteries. That's something that the general media is not telling you. There's a reason why they have to charge them relatively slowly, even at the fast chargers. You induce that much current that quickly into a battery, and the service life of the battery goes down. And that's a very big deal when you're talking about an electric car because of the expense of replacing the battery and also the possibility of a short and a fire occurring. So that's a significant problem. The other thing, of course, is just the expense. This Golf is a very nice car. It's also a very expensive car. It's about $31,000, so it's about $10,000 more expensive than the same car without the electric drivetrain. And I don't know whether you could justify, in terms of just money, leaving aside all the environmental stuff, just money, which is something everybody has to think about who hasn't got unlimited resources, spending $10,000 more on the electric car versus the non-electric car in terms of what you're going to save. You got to kind of get out the calculator and figure out how much gas does $10,000 buy. It buys a whole lot of gas, and it would take a long time to work it off with the electric car. And then you get into the whole longevity of the battery in the electric car. If it needs to be replaced at some point before the end of the service life of the vehicle, and let's say that that's reasonably 12 to 15 years, most people reasonably expect a new car to run reliably and relatively without trouble for at least 12 to 15 years. If the EV needs a new battery at, say, 8 or 9 years, which is likely because of charge-discharge cycles and the nature of battery chemistry, you're looking at another really big expense. Again, unless they figure out a way to dramatically decrease the cost of electric car batteries, and I have seen no evidence of a dramatic decrease in cost. They keep talking about the lowering of the cost, and yeah, the cost has come down, but it's still very, very high. You just look at the price of this thing, which is $10,000 more than the cost of the equivalent IC car, and nobody really knows exactly how much the car is being subsidized internally by the manufacturers and how much money they're losing on sales of these vehicles. It's a really big problem, and again, no matter what you think about environmental issues and climate change, when the rubber hits the road, people have to be able to afford the cars that they're buying, and the manufacturers have to be able to make a profit on the cars that they're building. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. There's really no point to building a quote-unquote environmentally sensitive car that most people can't afford to buy, and there's no point in building it if the manufacturers can't make any money selling it. So that is the conclusion of my rant today. I'll have some more road testing of this car over the course of the next couple of days. One thing I wanted to mention is that the drive I took yesterday was predominantly low speed, relatively low speed, averaged about, as you can see, 38 miles an hour, and generally, you know, not faster than 60, 65, 70 or so. I'm curious to see how highway driving affects the range of this car, so I'm going to try to take it out on the highway, ideally with a full charge, and just set the cruise at about 70, which is what the speed limit is on Interstate 81, and see what that does. So stay tuned. We'll have more up at epautos.com. I also just posted my review of the non-electric 2020 Kia Soul, which I actually like a lot. It's a car with a lot of verve, a lot of personality, and it also has a wall of sound audio system that comes with its own wall of light to accompany it. That's one of the neat features of the vehicle. So anyway, you can see that up at epautos.com. And if you have any questions about electric cars, generally, anything you want to ask me about, there's a button on the site that you can click. It's called Ask Eric, and I'll get to your question as quickly as I can, and assuming I have something worthwhile to reply, I will do so, and if I don't, I will let you know that I don't and try and point you in the right direction. So again, thanks for viewing. We'll catch up with you again soon.